Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the focus of my research is on the 3D visualization of subsea environments. These are most often historic or hazardous shipwrecks. There's sometimes aircraft that have been lost at sea, and occasionally oil and gas installations. My interest is very much in the aircraft and shipwrecks kind of area. And since 2005, where I really started getting into this through my PhD, we've recorded over 300 sites, mainly for historic reasons worldwide. I'm going to focus on just one of them because it's very recent for us, and it's also one of the most challenging that we've taken on. So we're going to look at the work that we did for the 80th anniversary of the sinking of HMS Royal Oak at Scapa Flow, sunk in 1939. So most of this work was carried out during 2019, but continued through last year, 2020. So one of the questions that Maria specifically said is, try and talk about why we're using immersive technology. So I've going to take that really quite literally. In our case, we're dealing with very remote hazardous environments that they're inaccessible to most people and usually inaccessible to our research team as well. We just get licensed to have access for a certain period of time. And in this case, it's protected by law. So other divers are not allowed on this site in Orkney. It's a war grave, and it's full of munitions, live munitions that were on board when it was sunk. In the augmented reality area, which we'll touch on, some of the artifacts recovered from these wrecks are pretty fragile, and handling or displaying them can cause damage. So using 3D scans allows us to interrogate those a little bit without further contamination. And another reason for the scanning is that quite often the museums, and we've been dealing a lot with Stromness Museum and Kirkwall Museum, they're quite small spaces and they don't have the space to display every artifact, which I think is probably common in most museums. Additional point, as a kind of method, we capture data at the highest resolution that we can achieve at the time. So that's limited to budget and what's available. But generally, we go for higher resolution, even though we might not be able to process all of that, particularly in 3D using structure from motion at the time. But we can certainly downsize it to use the technology we've got. But since we started doing this, the technology has improved so much that data we captured back in the first 10 years of this century, we're now able to reprocess and get high resolution results from it. And the other thing is you may not get an opportunity to revisit a site. So it's important you get as much as you can while you're there. So a little bit of history. I'll try and keep this brief because I want to get onto the pictures. Royal Oak was first laid down in 1916. Fought in World War I, particularly the Battle of Jutland, and it's a big ship. It's 189 meters long. So even compared to modern day warships, Royal Oak was pretty big. There were some structural changes took place in 1935. You can see on this picture on the side of the hull where there's a bulge that kind of sticks out a little bit out of the water. Those are torpedo bulges, and they're meant to stop the penetration of torpedoes through the side to sink the ship. This didn't work for Royal Oak, unfortunately, because on the 14th of October, late night, the ship was sunk by U-47, a U-boat, and this was very early part of World War II, start of World War II, basically about 6 weeks in, and there was a huge loss. The ship was sunk by 4 torpedoes and with a loss of 835 lives. Still one of the biggest ever naval losses in history, British history. Our survey project was meant to capture data from the wreck and basically examine what condition it was in, whether there were any munitions looking like they were going to cause any problems. And to do this, we worked with the Royal Navy Northern Diver Group. Those are the guys in the rib on the picture on the left. and they're basically bomb disposal experts. So very useful people to have around. And then some of our team on the boat on the right, a big collaboration, all voluntary. So this is data that we captured back in 2006 on behalf of the Ministry of Defence. So you can see it's what we call multi-beam sonar data, and this is captured using a device that sends out sonar pings and measures the length of time that an echo takes to get back to the boat on the surface. And the longer the time, the deeper the object. So as you get these corresponding echoes, it builds up a 3D image. And we were pretty at the head of the market at the time. This still is used as data to compare with more recent data sets to see how the ship's changing. Okay. So what we've been doing with the 80th survey is using that base data from 2006 and then adding in structure from motion, because the problem with multi-beam is it's created by sound. It doesn't give you color or texture. Whereas with photogrammetry, we were able to get on site with lots of lighting and high resolution cameras and just capture significant features of the wreck over time. That image is the guy in the middle, or the lower diver. That's my colleague Kari Huhtinen, who's a pioneer in this kind of underwater photogrammetry technique. And I'm just above him, kind of illuminating the site. If you go, excuse me, the wreck's at 32 meters. If you come 10 meters under the water, you lose all color, all of the color red disappears immediately. So we have to illuminate everything that we're recording. It's a slight difference from carrying out this kind of data capture on land, where generally daylight is giving you lots of information. Comparing the multi-beam sonar, this is an image. I hope it's clear. It's just little dots in space. It's a point cloud. And it shows you the A turret and B turret sections. These are near the bow. Now the ship's upside down, as you saw from the other image. And the whole of that data set for the multi-beam data, including the seabed, is 1.5 million points. When we went back with the photogrammetry, this is a turret with the photogrammetry with a little diver image to give you a sense of scale. That's 35 million points just for a turret. So quite a significant increase in fidelity. And as you can see, we've managed to capture pretty much all the color and fine detail that the multi-beam just misses out. If you just compare those two, if you look around the seabed, there's a few little lumps there, but you can't tell what they are. And then with the photogrammetry, it's clear what they are. These items on the right-hand side have just fallen from the deck over time. So back to the original image. Let me just check something. There we go. And then this is the extent of the photogrammetry data that we've processed so far. So we got quite a lot of it done during 2019, and we put that into a documentary about the project, which kind of tells the story of the Royal Oak, but also tells the story of some of the survivors and some of the witnesses to the sinking. And the whole point of the project was to reveal all of this to people who will never get to see it, which is most of the population. So again, comparing the data, as I said before, it's 1.5 million points for the multi-beam data, and that extent of photogrammetry data you can see there is 230 million. So quite heavy duty. This is the reverse side. This is the starboard side, and you can see the 4 torpedo holes. So looking from the left, that was the first hit at the bow. The second hit just missed the ammunition store. If that had been hit directly, the whole ship would have been fragmented with even further loss of life. And then third and fourth hits are pretty much midships as the ship's rolled over. What we did with that data is we took it to the local communities, and we started off running workshops with school children. So the approach we took was, for this use of the data, we wanted to give the pupils a sense of what it felt like to dive on the ship. So the data itself is pretty agnostic. It doesn't know what you're going to do with it. We've used a lot of it for animation, for the documentary that we made, and also for just online sharing the data. But we specifically made a couple of projects where you could explore this, and the controller in the girl's hand on the left-hand image, she's using that as a torch. So she can point it at different points in the wreck as she moves around, and it illuminates that area. So it's very much like we were capturing the data in the same method. And then you can jump to different points. You can hold in your left hand a small model of a virtual model of the wreck, and you can point at a different section, and that transports you to, say, the third turret or the midships area or the torpedo area. We also captured a lot of 360 video around the wreck. So the two students on the right-hand side are using much kind of consumer level headsets, and they're just looking around the turret. And we had a lot of interlopers when we were shooting the 360 video. There are two seal pups that are resident on the wreck, and they seem to like the lights. So as soon as we set up the 360 camera and put the lighting around it, these seal pups would start photobombing. The girl in the pink jumper just turned around as the seal swam past her. So we had lots of little additional immersive experiences that we didn't expect. Those were the younger end of the people experiencing the workshops. This is on the left is a chap called Johnny Meal, who witnessed the sinking of the ship. In fact, he says he witnesses it, but he was about 11 years old, and it sank at 11 o'clock at night. But his house was where he was born, where he lived his whole life, and unfortunately died in mid-2020. He'd gone to bed. So when he went to bed, the ship was there, all lit up. When he got up the next morning, it was gone. It sunk overnight. So he does embellish the stories a little bit, but he's a lovely guy. And any documentary you see on the HMS Royal Oak, there's an interview with Johnny, including ours. And we dedicated the film to him because he died just before we finished and released it. On the right-hand side, we've got another group of people who are politicians. So we managed to go and show the immersive experiences of HMS Royal Oak with the museum sector presentations at Holyrood. And on that purple table, or purple covered table, there's a little bit that says SMS Mark Graph. And that's another one of our little projects where articles were stolen from the wreck of the Mark Graph, which is a German wreck from World War I in Orkney, were recovered by the police, given to HES for conservation, and HES came to us to look at scanning them as a kind of digital archive, because they were deteriorating rapidly. They've been in the water for almost 100 years. As soon as they're brought out into the air, they start falling to pieces. So we were doing like quick capture, and that's my colleague, Alice Watterson, who did all the 3D scanning for that. So we put these into an augmented reality enhanced book, which we call a pop-up book, a 3D pop-up book. And here's a couple of the pages. So you use standard AR, you use a tablet or a smartphone with a little key image, and then this will pop up the object. So on the left-hand side, you're seeing one of the ship's telephones, and on the right-hand side, you're seeing what some of the sailors below decks would wear around their chests. So this is actually the first hands-free phone. It's got a little mouthpiece, and so they could continue doing their work and they'd have a headset in, so they could hear the message from upstairs or above deck, and then speak into this mouthpiece without having to take their hands off it. So I would demonstrate this, but this is my only copy of it, and it's just been sent off for ref. I'm not sure everybody else has experienced that kind of thing. The other augmented reality work we did with Stromness Museum was about the SCAP 100 project, which included the Royal Oak stuff that I just shown you. So this was 4 panels that were installed at the entrance to the museum, as you can see on the left-hand side, and then re-shown in the AHRC event, which you can see on the right. So the image, if you look on the left, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but there's a little image of the multi-beam of Royal Oak, and then a little key sticker on there. And if you point to your device using the Zapper app, then the animation of that ship would pop out just in front of the the panel. And there were 6 other artifacts presented like that. So there's lots of different things from different periods of time represented as AR in there. And so lessons learned. These are more kind of obvious takeaways, but I thought I'd go obvious. Just repeating, capture the best or the highest quality data that you can, because you might not get back, and you might want to retask it for something a bit more higher resolution as the technology improves. Archiving is a bane to all of us, because the demands of AHRC and others for having digital archives are change at a whim. The reason I put archiving in is when we were week 8 into the Royal Oak project on site, we were processing data overnight, then getting out on the boat the next day. On one Saturday night, while we were asleep upstairs and our kit was processing and uploading in the kitchen table, we were burgled, and we lost a laptop, and we lost some lights, and we lost 4 hard drives that were in the process of backing up. So we lost just over 2 weeks' work in one night. And I don't know what else we could have done other than just sleep in the kitchen and have shotguns ready. We managed to catch up basically because the Ministry of Defence extended our license by 3 weeks, so we could go back in November and recapture that data. But if we hadn't got that permission, we would have lost a whole chunk of data. The other thing about archiving I've found, since still working on the data a little while later, is that once you're backing everything up, make sure that your naming conventions make sense. Because if you're looking at somebody else's data a year later and they haven't stuck to the same naming conventions for your source data, that is an absolute pain. The other thing, which I think is really more is definitely in terms of PhD practice, whatever you're doing, be playful with your data, be playful with your capture approach, because even though some of us have been doing this for donkey's years, we still are able to learn from every project. We learn something new and we go, well, let's try it this way. Let's try it with different lighting. Let's try it with 4 people lighting on 3 cameras in alignment and all these kind of things. We try something new every time. Sometimes it doesn't work. And as a few people already said, that's not failure. That's a scientific method. So be prepared to just think about, are you just following what everybody else has done? Take a few risks and see what happens. And also the last point I want to make, and I think this has been said a few times as well, consider what story you're trying to tell with your visualization, with your immersive experience. What's the story and who are you telling it to? Is it to other practitioners and researchers, or is it to those school kids at a secondary school, or is it to the general public who have a historical interest or potentially future interest in what you're doing? So those are kind of obvious, but I don't mind stating the obvious now and again. The last thing I'll say, I think I'm not more than a minute over. Our documentary is on Vimeo. We launched it just about the 80th anniversary project. It's about 26 minutes long at the moment. We've had about 11,000 views so far. But I'd really like you to go and have a look at it. It gives a lot more detail. It's a lot of talking about the basics of structure for emotion for a general audience. And there's some great interviews in there and some lovely footage from my colleagues. So that, I think, is me. Other than one other point, I can plug a TV program on Monday evening at 9 o'clock on More 4, and it's about the world's greatest shipwrecks. And some of our work on HMS Vanguard and HMS Hampshire is included in that first program. So that's me.